Rain fell hard on the stone streets of New York in 1857, washing the lamps into blurred halos and turning the avenues into rivers of mud. Eleanor Bennett pulled her thin shawl tight and kept walking, even as hunger twisted her stomach. At 23, she had already learned how fast hope could disappear. Her father had been a country doctor in Pennsylvania, and she had worked beside him since she was a girl. After his death, she came to the city believing skill and honesty would be enough. They were not. 2 weeks without work, she whispered, counting the last coins in her purse. By morning, her landlady would throw her out. Carriages rushed past her on Fifth Avenue, splashing dirty water onto her skirt. Wealth moved around her like she did not exist. She stopped beneath the glow of a grand townhouse, drawn by raised voices at the entrance. 2 footmen were carrying a tall man down the steps, his face pale, his jaw clenched in pain. "Someone fetch Dr. Harris," an older butler shouted. "He left for Boston this morning," a footman replied. "He will not return for days." The man being carried lifted his head. His gray eyes were sharp despite the pain. "I will not wait," he said through his teeth. Before Eleanor could think, she stepped forward. "I can help. My father was a physician. I assisted him for years." The butler turned, shocked. "This is Mr. Alexander Weston, one of the wealthiest men in New York. This is no place for—" "Let her speak," Alexander said. His voice was strained but firm. Eleanor met his gaze. "I know what pain looks like. Please." After a long moment, Alexander nodded. "Bring her in." Minutes later, Eleanor stood in a bedroom larger than her entire attic room. Heavy curtains, thick carpets, and a massive bed filled the space. Alexander lay back as his coat and boots were removed, revealing a dark stain of swelling around an old bullet wound in his left leg. "War injury," he said. "From Mexico. It flares, but never like this." Eleanor worked carefully, her hands steady. She cleaned the area and prepared a poultice using supplies from his cabinet. The butler watched her like a hawk. "This needs continued care," Eleanor said once she finished. "There is infection. Daily treatment." Alexander studied her, the pain in his eyes mixing with interest. "What is your name?" "Eleanor Bennett." "And where do you practice?" She lowered her eyes. "I do not. Women are not allowed." He was silent, thinking. Then he said, "Stay here tonight. Care for me until morning. I will pay you $50. Her breath caught. $50 could change everything. "For how long, sir?" "1 night. The pain worsens after dark. By morning it eases." The butler gasped. "Sir, the impropriety." "Leave us," Alexander ordered. Eleanor felt the weight of the moment. 1 night in a powerful man's private rooms could ruin her reputation. But hunger and fear pressed hard against her pride. "I accept," she said quietly, "but only for medical care." A faint smile touched his lips. "Of course." As night deepened, Eleanor was placed in a small room beside his. Food was brought, rich and warm, but her nerves stole her appetite. She listened to the silence, broken only by the distant sounds of the city. "Miss Bennett," Alexander called at last. She entered the room. Lamps softened the sharp lines of the space. He looked younger now, vulnerable, his dark hair falling loose. "The pain has returned." She examined his leg. The swelling was worse. She applied another poultice. "You have gentle hands," he said. "My mother used to tend my wounds herself." She smiled softly. "She sounds kind." "She died when I was 12. Fever." The best doctors could not save her. Eleanor paused. "I am sorry." Alexander watched her closely. "Call me Alexander," he said. "At least while we are alone." "That would be improper." He smiled faintly. "More improper than this." She stepped back, flustered, and finished her work. "Try to rest." The hours passed slowly. Near midnight, his skin burned with fever. Eleanor placed a cool cloth on his brow. "There is deeper infection," she said. "But I will not let it take you." He reached for her hand without thinking. "Please stay." She held his hand, surprised by how natural it felt. "I should prepare a stronger medicine," she said gently. As she worked, he spoke. "I was shot leading men who trusted me. Sometimes I think I should have died there." "You survived," she said firmly, "and you will survive this." She helped him drink the bitter tincture. "Eleanor," he murmured. Hearing her name on his lips sent a strange warmth through her chest. Dawn finally crept through the curtains. Eleanor woke stiff and exhausted in a chair by the bed. Alexander slept peacefully, his fever gone. "You stayed," he said when he woke. "Of course." He handed her a heavy leather pouch. "Your payment." She took it, but the weight felt strange now. "Would you return tomorrow?" he asked. The treatment should continue. She hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow evening only." As she left at dawn, whispers followed her from the servants. Outside, the city moved on like nothing had changed. But Eleanor knew it had. One night meant to save her from ruin had bound her to a man whose power could protect her or destroy her. And as she walked home with a fortune in her pocket, she could not stop thinking of the loneliness in Alexander Weston's eyes and how dangerously close it felt to her own. Eleanor did not sleep that day. She paid her rent, bought bread and clean linen, and sat on the edge of her narrow bed staring at the wall. The heavy pouch of money lay beside her, proof that the night had been real, yet her thoughts were not on the coins. They returned again and again to the look in Alexander Weston's eyes when pain stripped away his pride. By evening, fear followed her back to the grand townhouse. The same elderly butler opened the door, his mouth tight with disapproval. "Miss Bennet," he said coldly, "Mr. Weston awaits you in the library." The library was warm and filled with firelight. Tall shelves rose to the ceiling, packed with books Eleanor had only dreamed of reading. Alexander stood near the hearth, no longer confined to bed. He leaned lightly on a cane, his limp present but controlled. "You look stronger," she said, keeping her distance. "Thanks to you," he replied. "Please, sit." She hesitated, then did. Tea waited on a small table. This felt too much like a social visit, not a medical one. "Your leg," she prompted. "Much improved, but that is not why I asked you here." Her fingers tightened around her cup. "Then why?" Alexander studied her carefully. "I made inquiries about you." Her heart sank. "Inquiries?" "Your father was Dr. Thomas Bennet, respected and skilled. You worked beside him for years. After his death, you came here and were forced into positions beneath your abilities because you would not compromise yourself." Eleanor stared. "How do you know this?" "I have resources," he said simply, "and I wish to be certain of what I already believed." "Which is?" "That you are a physician in all but name, and that this city wastes your talent." He stood and walked slowly before the fire. "I want to offer you a position on my estate outside the city. You would care for my staff, my tenants, and the nearby town. You would practice openly, under my protection." The words stole her breath. "That is impossible. A woman cannot serve as a doctor." "She can, if no one dares to challenge her," he said, "and no one will challenge me." Suspicion rose through her hope. "What do you want in return?" He turned sharply. "Do you think I seek payment of that sort?" "Forgive me," she said quickly, "but generosity from a man of your position invites assumptions." "Let them assume," he replied. "I care little for gossip. I care for ability, and for what you did for me when I was helpless." His honesty unsettled her more than any demand would have, yet fear remained. Before she could answer, the door opened. Lady Margaret Holloway entered without waiting for permission, her smile sharp and satisfied. "Alexander," she said, "how fortunate to find you entertained." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Lady Holloway's eyes swept over her with thinly veiled contempt. "Miss Bennet, how surprising to see you here again." "She was providing medical care," Alexander said coldly. "Medical care," Lady Holloway echoed. "Of course." She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sting. "I do worry about your reputation, my dear. A woman leaving a gentleman's rooms at dawn invites misunderstanding." "There was nothing improper," Eleanor said, though her voice trembled. "Perhaps," Lady Holloway said, "but society prefers stories to truth." Alexander stepped between them. "Enough. Miss Bennet is under my protection. Any insult to her is an insult to me." Lady Holloway stiffened. "You would defend a woman like this?" "I would defend anyone wronged by cruelty and lies," he said. Silence followed, heavy and dangerous. Lady Holloway forced a smile. "Very well. I see I am no longer welcome. Come," she said to her daughter. "We would not wish to intrude on such important consultations." When she left, Eleanor's legs felt weak. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. "I did," Alexander replied, "and I will again." That night, Eleanor returned home shaken. By morning, rumors had already begun. Her landlady's eyes lingered too long. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors. Yet the next evening, Eleanor packed her bag and traveled with Alexander's carriage to his estate. The countryside opened before her, wide and green, far from the choking streets of the city. The estate was large, but the village beside it was poor. Children coughed. Old men limped untreated. Women hid pain behind tired smiles. Eleanor went to work at once. Days turned into weeks. Her hands were never idle. She treated fevers, stitched wounds, delivered babies. People began to trust her, then rely on her. They called her doctor without irony. Alexander watched quietly from a distance. He never crossed her boundaries, yet his presence was constant. He ensured supplies arrived, defended her authority, silenced critics with calm strength. In the evenings, they spoke by the fire, about books, about war, about loneliness. He told her of the battlefield and the men he lost. She told him of her father and the joy of healing. The space between them filled with something neither named. One evening, as autumn leaves fell, Alexander spoke softly. "You have changed this place." "So have you," she replied. Their eyes met, and the unspoken truth trembled between them. The world would never allow what was growing, yet neither could deny it now. Some bonds, Eleanor realized, formed not in passion, but in care, and those were the hardest to break. Winter came early that year, laying frost over the fields and silence over the estate. Eleanor moved through her days with purpose, her reputation now firmly rooted among the villagers. They no longer questioned her presence. They trusted her hands and her judgment. Children ran to her when they fell. Mothers waited for her advice. The title doctor no longer felt borrowed. It felt earned. Yet beyond the village, the world was not as kind. Letters began to arrive from the city, invitations wrapped in polite words and sharp intent. Whispers had grown louder. A duke employing a woman as a physician, a woman living under his protection. Society had noticed. Alexander read the letters without comment, his jaw tightening each time. Eleanor saw the strain he tried to hide. "You do not owe me this fight," she said one evening as they sat near the fire. "If this harms your standing, I will leave." He looked at her then, truly looked at her. "You are not a burden. You are the best decision I have made since surviving the war." She swallowed. Words like that were dangerous. Soon after, Lady Holloway arrived, unannounced. She stood in the drawing room, elegant and cold, her eyes scanning Eleanor with open judgment. "You have made quite a spectacle of yourself, Miss Bennet," she said. "Playing doctor in the countryside does not erase what people believe." "Say what you came to say," Alexander replied sharply. Lady Holloway smiled thinly. "Society is patient, but it does not forget. If this arrangement continues, rumors will harden into truth. Your name will suffer, and hers will be ruined beyond repair." Eleanor felt the familiar fear rise. This was the cost she had always known would come. "Enough," Alexander said. "You will leave." Lady Holloway paused. "Or what?" "Or you will discover just how little I value the approval of people who mistake cruelty for virtue." When she was gone, silence filled the room. That night, Eleanor stood awake in her small cottage, staring at the ceiling. She had built a life here, one she loved, but it was balanced on Alexander's protection. That truth sat heavy in her chest. By morning, she had decided. She found Alexander on the terrace, walking slowly with his cane. "I will leave," she said before fear could stop her. "I will return to the city. I can find work quietly, without drawing attention to you." He stopped. "No. This cannot continue forever," she said softly. "I will not be the reason you are pulled down." He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You are not the reason. You are the answer." She shook her head. "The world will never accept this." "Then we will build something it cannot ignore," he said. "I am tired of surviving alone, and I will not let you face this world alone again." He reached into his coat and held out a small velvet box. Eleanor's breath caught. "I offered you protection once for a night," he said. "You gave me back my life. I will not pretend this bond is anything less than what it is." He opened the box, revealing a deep blue stone set in silver. "I am asking you to stand beside me, not behind me, as my wife, as my equal, as the woman who healed me when I was weakest." Tears blurred her vision. "People will talk." "Let them," he said gently. "We will still be here when they grow tired of talking." She thought of the frightened woman on the street, counting coins in the rain. She thought of the children she had saved, the hands she had held, the man before her who had seen her worth before anyone else had. "Yes," she said, "not because you are a duke, but because you are the first man who never asked me to be smaller." Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into an embrace that felt steady and safe, not rushed, not stolen. Spring came again, brighter than before. Eleanor remained the doctor of the estate. Alexander stood beside her without apology. Some doors closed. Others opened wider than they ever expected. And when people spoke of their story, they did not remember the scandal. They remembered that a wounded man once offered a fortune for a single night of care, never knowing that his fragility would awaken a love strong enough to change both their lives forever.